Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. With a massive amount of news coverage of the discovery of the Kamloops graves, many of our residential school survivors are being triggered by the new information. APTN's Priscilla Wolf explains.
Try not to cry.
Rex Lumberjack is a survivor, and he used to be an Indian residential school counselor. He says the work got to be too much, and this recent news coverage has also triggered him.
People say, get over it. People do say that to us, get over it. But how do you get over grief and loss? I lost my childhood, my innocence, my youth here, and even part of my adulthood trying to drink myself to death. And I did mention 3 weeks ago I attempted suicide. This was before the story broke, right?
Now with the news coverage of the graves being uncovered in BC and at the school he attended, Muskowgan Indian Residential School, he feels a bit vindicated.
I'm not called a liar as much. Right. It didn't happen. That could not happen, right? And not even that is, I went through the IAP process, right? And then the day school process right here. This is a recognized day school.
Lumberjack adds, memories are being brought back up and people have to deal with them with self-care, reflection, and talking to other people like peer counselors. He also finds comfort in residential school gatherings with his peers.
It's comforting knowing that I'm amongst survivors, that they truly understand what we endured here in the late 60s, early 70s.
George Morasti is one of those peer counselors. He is also a survivor, and he works as a resolution health support worker in Prince Albert. He attended the Prince Albert Residential School in the 1960s. He says the news coverage has been hard on him.
Yes, it's been really, it's been hard, because I got triggered a few times. Things that I have forgotten came to light, and I had to have a good support system.
He says survivors helping survivors is one of the best ways to help.
One of the things that I find most helpful, I guess, would be a survivor to help another survivor of how they came through, what they did, to begin their healing journey.
Lumberjack and Morasti are on a lifelong healing journey as survivors, and even though Lumberjack can no longer counsel his peers, they both find comfort in Canada knowing the truth with proof.
At least the evidence is there now that you can't deny, what happened, because there's so much denial, to them it didn't happen, and now at least it's out in the open.
Priscilla Wolf, APTN National News, Saskatoon.
And a warning now about this next story as it describes graphic details of a survivor's time at a residential school in Alberta. A former chief of the Gitxsan community of Kispiox in British Columbia is glad the graves at residential schools are finally getting attention. George Meldo was at the Edmonton Indian Residential School from 1951 to 1962. He's been pushing for years to have graves acknowledged and bodies returned to home communities. He dug graves at the school for patients who died at the Charles Camsell TB Hospital. Meldo says the bodies were buried all over the site. Speaking with APTN News, Meldo recalled the time he was ordered to dig a grave in 1958.
It was mid-January, and the weather there, it's pretty bad mid-January. The supervisor told us, you, great detail, and you usually don't have a choice. And I think I was about 16 at the time, and my two helpers were younger than I was. And we started digging Friday afternoon about 3 o'clock or a little later. And we're finished by Sunday night, late Sunday night, we're finally finished. Meanwhile, the body was laying there. And whenever we bury somebody, there's never relatives, never preacher, nobody. Just somebody in a dilapidated pickup that dropped them off and drive away again. And that was it.
The National Indian Residential School Crisis Line is available for survivors and others who might need support. That number is 1-866-925-4419. To the East Coast now, and the one-year anniversary of Chantel Moore's death at the hands of police just passed. But there was more grim news for her family, as the officer who fatally shot her during a wellness check will not face charges. Angel Moore brings us Chantel's family's reaction, who say there are more questions than answers.
A year ago, Chantel Moore of Tlawaquit First Nation in British Columbia was fatally shot by police. However, the prosecutor's office announced no charges will be laid against the officer. Grace Frank, Chantel's grandmother, does not trust the investigation.
I'm so angry my granddaughter didn't deserve to die like that. There's a lot more to this story. Why did she have a broken leg? Why did she have a broken arm? Why were there bruises on her body? She had bruises around her waist and on inside of her thighs, like something happened to her before they killed her.
Supporters gathered at the Legislative Building in Fredericton. Moore's mother, Martha Martin, was there and said she will keep fighting for change.
How do we start to mend bridges with policing? Because there's so much distrust, there's no transparency. How do we hold them more accountable? All those kinds of questions that come into your mind, and what are the next steps from here? We don't know, just take it one step at a time.
Police say Moore came at the officer with a knife. Frank does not believe the police are being transparent.
To me, it's just like police working for police. And I seriously think that no one will ever be convicted or charged, be held accountable for killing someone, taking another human being's life.
Moore's family will discuss how to move forward. Angel Moore, APTN National News, Jabukduk, known as Halifax.
In Thunder Bay today, a cry from the families whose loved ones' deaths are being reinvestigated. In its 2019 report, Broken Trust, the Ontario Police Watchdog recommended taking another look at the deaths of 9 Indigenous people in the city. A report on those investigations has been continually pushed back. Now, some of those families are alleging a lack of transparency through the new process. Lawyer Julian Faulkner, who is representing the family of Stacey DeBungy, says the families say they've been cut out of the review process, which is underway and set to be released now in September. Family members are also sounding the alarm over Thunder Bay Police Chief Sylvie Haas' role in the process. Faulkner says the relationship between the Thunder Bay Police and Indigenous peoples has not improved since the Broken Trust report found systemic racism within the service.
We are now 2.5 years beyond the Broken Trust report. What I am about to say, that the Thunder Bay Police Service continues to devalue, delegitimize Indigenous lives in this city, is no longer about broken trust. It is a broken record.
The statue of Egerton Ryerson came crashing down on Sunday, but the statue's head disappeared. We'll fill you in on where it ended up after the break. Welcome back to Métis politics now. And the presidents of the Métis Nation, British Columbia, Ontario, Alberta, and Saskatchewan are calling on Clem Cartier to remove himself from the Métis National Council. Cartier is the longtime president of the council. In November 2019, he said he would not seek re-election and step back. Last month, he was soundly beaten in the election for president of Métis Nation, Saskatchewan. Just last week, he spoke to the federal government's action plan on MMIWG as MNC president. The MNC election has been on hold for over a year because of COVID. The four leaders say an MNC Board of Governors will meet on June 22nd to appoint an interim president. Egerton Ryerson was an architect of the Canadian residential school system. The head from his statue now rests on Six Nations, where the first official residential school opened. APTN News has confirmed with land defenders at 1492 Landback Lane in Caledonia that the head of the statue is there at the site. The closest former residential school is the Mohawk Institute in Brantford, one of the oldest continuously operated schools in the country. Ryerson's statue was toppled this weekend amid calls from faculty and students to rename the Toronto University. Edmonton City Council has unanimously voted to remove a mural and change the name of a railway station that depicts former Roman Catholic Bishop Vital Grandin. Grandin had a key role in the early residential school system. APTN's Chris Stewart has more.
Since 1989, this image of Bishop Vital Grandin has been seen by passengers taking the light rail transit system. It's hard to miss. The station itself is called Grandin Station. Several panels show Grandin at a residential school, with a nun holding a baby. The scene has made many Indigenous people uncomfortable, since Grandin had a key role in establishing residential schools. Edmonton-based Papaches First Nation Chief Calvin Bruno says he has talked to many members who wanted the mural removed.
I rode the subway myself, and when you pull up to that station and then you see the Catholic school or Catholic, the bishop, and you got priests and nuns there, it does make you uncomfortable.
To be an agent of reconciliation in accordance with the oath I took for this office and the oath I took to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission.
On Monday, Edmonton City Council voted 100% in favor of changing the name and removing the controversial mural.
The motion requests that the naming committee do some community engagement and bring us a proposal with some thought to the potential to support reconciliation.
Alberta Premier Jason Kenney doubled down on comments he made last week where he defended against renaming or removing monuments.
The recognition of the terrible evil of the unit residential schools must continue, but that should not lead us to efface most of our history.
Chief Bruno says that Edmonton needs to have more consultations with Indigenous populations and suggests the new name should be the Papache Station.
You drive around, you walk around, you don't see any artwork, you don't see any statues, basically promoting Indigenous history and culture. You don't see that. And then it's just like, wow, we got a lot of work to do here.
The mural was covered up Monday night with orange to honor the 215 children who lost their lives in the Kamloops residential school. Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Edmonton.
To the West Coast now, where today the federal government laid out a $647 million plan which they hope will rebuild Pacific salmon stocks that have collapsed in recent years. The Department of Fisheries and Oceans said the plan will include conservation, stewardship, enhanced hatcheries, as well as collaboration with First Nations. This past December, the government said 19 fish farms would be shut down. Many scientists blame them for spreading disease among salmon. DFO said today they are committed to addressing wild salmon decline for years to come.
The largest, most transformative investment in salmon by any government in history. Canada's Pacific Salmon Strategy is not a new report or a new study. It's a ready-to-go funding that will lead to comprehensive efforts to achieve a single goal: to stop the decline of Pacific wild salmon now and to help rebuild populations in the longer term.
The remote flying community of Garden Hill First Nation in Manitoba has made a major decision in regards to the schooling in the community. All students will continue with the grade they were in this year, in the upcoming school year. Daryl Stranger has more.
The COVID-19 pandemic has made delivering education to students much harder, especially in First Nations where internet can be hard to come by. Garden Hill First Nation closed down their elementary and high schools early in the pandemic to try to limit the spread of COVID-19. The high school has since been used as an isolation center. The remote flying community tried remote learning, but connectivity and access to internet and the needed equipment posed a challenge.
We have LTE available to us. We have cell phone service here in Garden Hill, but unfortunately, the connection is pretty bad.
So the community had to make a difficult decision and hold all students back.
The administration and I and the teachers felt that there was not enough coverage of the general outcomes and the specific outcomes from the curriculum to warrant them to be competent in the next grade level. So that tough decision was made.
Indigenous Services Canada says funding through Budget 2021 will assist in a safe return to school for First Nations. Quote, Budget 2021 announced an additional investment of $112 million in 2021-2022 to support First Nations with the resources they need to appropriately plan and prepare for a safe return to school for students and staff in the upcoming school year, whether that is in person or online. Indigenous Services Canada also said they were not aware of any other First Nations holding back all of its students for 1 year. Monia says ultimately it's the future success of the students that fueled the decision.
Our goal of Garden Hill education is that every student should be competent wherever they go. If they move to Winnipeg, Brandon, Thompson, anywhere, they should be competent academically. They shouldn't be the stigma of 2-3 years behind. So that's why we need to bring them up. We will start recovery learning in September.
Daryl Stranger, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Tough year for so many students, parents, and educators. Still in Manitoba, a bold move from the government today. The province is unveiling a new immunization card for fully vaccinated people. It's the first province to do that, but likely not the last. Premier Brian Pallister says the card has a number of benefits, including Manitobans, to allow travel within Canada without having to self-isolate when they get back.
You will be exempt from the self-isolating requirements if you're deemed a close contact by public health. In other words, if you get a call from public health notifying you you've been in close contact with someone who's had COVID, because you have this card and because it's evidence that you've been vaccinated twice, you won't have to self-isolate as a result.
Pallister adds that any Manitoban with one of the cards will also be allowed to visit family and friends in personal care or a health facility. The Yukon government has announced that they've agreed to form a First Nation school board. It's to help improve student outcomes in the territory. The move comes after a handful of recent reports found the education system is failing to meet the demands of First Nation students. Here's APTN's Sarah Connors with what that entails.
When it comes to supporting First Nations students in the Yukon, problems go back more than a decade. In fact, the Auditor General of Canada highlighted issues in 2009 and again 10 years later. The 2019 audit found among many issues low graduation rates and insufficient culture and language programs. It concluded that the Department of Education did not do enough to assess or address the long-standing gaps in student outcomes. Now the Yukon government, 10 First Nations, and the Chiefs Committee on Education have come together and agreed to create a framework for a Yukon First Nations school board. It lays out the process for allowing First Nations and their citizens greater control over the education of their children in the hopes of improving their academic outcomes. Children will experience increased on-the-land learning and First Nation language instruction, as well as incorporating elders in the classroom.
When you see First Nation schools in our communities, ran by our elders, by our communities, and experiential knowledge, the rest of Canadians and Yukoners are going to look at the children in their school systems, and they're going to want the same for their children as well.
It's not yet clear when the school board will be up and running. And just as an interesting aside, non-Indigenous students are also welcome under the board. Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
Thanks, Sarah. Well, another sports team has changed its name and logo. Details coming up after the break. Welcome back. Time now to take a look at our photo of the day. And our very own Bruce Spence caught a glimpse of the setting sun over the shadowed skyline of Winnipeg's North End. Do be sure to send us your photos to share at aptn.ca, and be sure to tune in to see if your photo is our next photo of the day. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the East Coast, 25 with showers for Halifax and Fredericton. 3 with snow in Inukjuak, 6 with rain for Kuujjuaq. 29 in Montreal, partly cloudy, and 19 for Chibougamau. 30 in Sault Ste. Marie, 26 for North Bay. 23 under the sun in Thunder Bay, showers, and 25 for Sioux Lookout. 22 with rain for Norway House and the Paw. Showers, and 25 in Winnipeg, 22 in Brandon. 25 with rain for Saskatoon, 22 and showers in North Battleford. 22 in La Ronge and Meadow Lake. In northern Alberta, 22 and cloudy for Fort McMurray, 18 with showers in Peace River. 19 with rain for Edmonton, 17 and showers in Lethbridge. 18 with rain for Vancouver, 20 in Kamloops. 16 with rain in Dease Lake and Smithers. 22 and rain for Old Crow, 19 under the sun for Whitehorse. 18 in Yellowknife, 24 in Norman Wells and Fort Simpson. 6 in Saxe Harbor, 10 in Pawlatuck. 4 in Arviette and Chesterfield, 3 in Baker Lake. 0 with snow in Resolute, plus 3 in Igloolik. A Manitoba Junior Hockey League team has a new name. Nipawa changed their name from the Natives to the Titans. The team changed their name after community pushback, which called for sports teams to stop using controversial Indigenous names. Other professional and amateur teams have also changed their names in response. The Washington NFL team was formerly the Redskins, and in Canada, the Edmonton Eskimos are now the Elks. The Titans will begin play in the fall with a new logo and jerseys. And a new name for the Cleveland baseball team is now expected next year. Well, that's all the time we have for your APTN National News for this Tuesday. For news anytime, visit our website, aptnnews.ca. And stay up to date with the latest by downloading the APTN News app. I'm Dennis Ward. Thanks for being with us. Have a great night.